Good morning, everybody. It's quite an exciting time to have such an array of panelists today, and thanks for agreeing to participate and sharing your expertise, your experience, and some of your views on the licensing business and the merchandising business. The timing is particularly interesting because two things are happening. There's this pandemic, which is challenging and forcing many sports organizations or any organization to rethink their business model and their revenue streams. And maybe it should be an opportunity for merchandising to become much more important part of their revenues. And the second thing is Manchester United announced their results, 2019 results. And for the first time, they generated more revenues from merchandising than from ticketing. And that's also an interesting trend happening in the sport business. So with this as background, what I would like to do is to hand over to Stephane and as the Deputy Managing Director of the French Tennis Federation. Interesting to see because Roland Garros, which is one of your major brands, is going through some interesting developments. So you will share that with us in a minute. So I'll hand over to you, Stephane.
Thanks, Bruno. And good morning, everyone. As you just said, I'm the Deputy CEO of the French Tennis Federation, meaning I'm in charge of marketing and all the revenue streams of Roland Garros, of the Rolex Paris Masters, and of the national French teams. But you're right, Roland Garros is by far our #1 asset. And I'm in charge of the various revenue streams, meaning ticketing, meaning hospitality, meaning TV rights, but also merchandising. And as you know, Bruno, I have a licensing background because I would say in my good old days, I was in charge of the licensing and retail activities of the NBA. And I can tell you merchandising is a key component of our, I would say, business, not only revenue-wise, but first and foremost in our brand building process. And I will definitely start with that, with a short presentation of Roland Garros. For the ones who are not tennis fans, Roland Garros is one of the 4 tennis Grand Slams. So that's definitely a major tennis event, a major sports event, a global one. So that's a 3-week event taking place end of May, early June, taking place in Paris, and we'll talk back about that. That's a key component of our tournament. It gathers more than 650,000 fans every year on site, and obviously several millions on TV and on social networks. And when we talk about Roland Garros as a tournament, okay, that's cool to develop our, I would say, match day revenues. To take Bruno's example about Manchester United, but the key thing to keep in mind is that Roland Garros is not only a tournament, it's a global brand. And our role, my role, is to, I would say, develop the Roland Garros brand based on this tournament, based on the I would say, sports competition. And if we consider Roland Garros as a global brand, and when we run our, I would say, yearly studies, it appears as one of the major sports brands in the world, with obviously key markets. We are not as famous in India as in Europe, as in the US, or as in Brazil, where I would say tennis is really strong. And right now, I would say on a pure brand standpoint, our priority markets are Europe by far, but as a strong #2 now, China, the US will closely follow, and Brazil with Guga a few years ago, and with lots of clay courts all over the country, are definitely strong markets in which we try to implement this brand building process. And when I talk about the brand building process, I talk about, I would say, a 360 strategy, which is pretty similar to what Warner, and I think Jay will talk about that in a few minutes, Disney and others do to build a brand. That's to say, to be present with our sport first and foremost, but then with our various, I would say, key pillars, with a strong brand positioning, with local events, with social networks, with ambassadors, and then we move forward and make ourselves present all year long, and not only, I would say, during 3 weeks, and not only in Paris, not only in downtown Paris. So on the slide, you can see the Eiffel Tower with our nice logo on, with a court down. But let's say the slide is pretty interesting because you can see the Eiffel Tower, because when we sell the Roland Garros brand, we sell tennis, we sell the excellence of tennis, but we also sell, I would say, the French elegance. We sell the Paris image. We sell something more, so that I would say Roland Garros can exist by itself as a brand and can be sold through merchandising products all year long in key department stores with a very strong positioning. I would say, I would define this strong positioning as premium access. In a way, that's a premium brand. And when we talk about products, when we talk about retail and licensing, right now we have, I would say, over 500 reference products all year long, either thanks to our, I would say, license partners, or we will talk about co-branded products with Lacoste, with Sisley for personal care, with Wilson for sports items, but also with Weston, for instance, which is a French brand, but which is known as all over the world. That's the co-branded products. But at the same time, since Roland Garros is a brand by itself, we develop our own range of apparel, of accessories, of masks to be sold under the Roland Garros logo only, because it's strong enough now to be sold, I would say, in December, in Jan, 6 months ahead or after the actual tournament. And I mentioned, you can see the visual, but I mentioned the top sales during our last tournament 2 months ago. You can see the mask. That's for the glimpse on the tournament, which took place in October during COVID. We also had a nice initiative around our official poster, and we gave back our margin to some social associations. And last but not least, the official towel, which is our best-selling item, was pretty successful, both on-site and online as well. But if I can give some strong figures, and then we will talk about fan engagement later, I think, but so that you may see I would say the power of our brand and the power of our products. The average spend per customer visiting our tournament is 90 euros. That's not bad at all compared to what I have experienced in my NBA days. That's, I would say, at least 3 times more, and we have a revenue per capita around 40 euros. Whereas in a usual concert or in a usual football game, you are more around 15 euros, 1.5 at max. So this kind of numbers show us that the brand has a strong potential, according to us. On a pure online standpoint, and I think we'll talk about that given the current situation, we develop ourselves, but compared to what Fanatics will tell us in a few minutes, we are definitely small, and that's a euphemism. As a KPI, I would mention the 900 orders we got during the men's final day. That's not so great, but we do think that there is a potential, and we saw that in the last few weeks. The sales are booming, as for everyone, but to our mind, the potential is bright, and I will finish with that and about a quick example and a quick video example. You were talking, Bruno, about the match day results. To my mind, we can go much beyond the in-stadia revenues I just mentioned, because I would say the match day revenues are not open-ended. If you are sold out, talking about ticket sales, hospitality packages, and if you sell, I would say, 11 products per second, which is our rate in Stadia, then you have to develop yourself out of, let's say, out Stadia, and merchandising is definitely, to my mind, the best revenue stream we have to focus on. And to do that, we have to work on the storytelling, and that's what we do with Weston. So I don't know if everyone is familiar with Weston, but Weston is a luxury brand selling shoes all over the world, and they saw that the collaboration with Roland Garros, with this French elegance positioning, was bringing something more to their brand, and this was the virtuous cycle I was referring to. They bring something more to our brand as well. So we for the past 3 years, we have built something together to make, I would say, the win-win collaboration even stronger. And I inserted a quick video to show you what we developed with them before the tournament, during the tournament, and after the tournament. And you will see that this kind of video is present on social networks, but in all their stores all over the world, with a focus in May. But not only, you can find these shoes, which are over 600 euros each, all year long. And to our mind, that's one of the first, I would say, pieces of evidence that our brand can live beyond our tennis tournament.
Eh oui, ce match a des heures de finale. Premier échange de balles. Elle déstabilise son adversaire. Le jeu s'accélère. Oh là là là. Oh, magnifique. Ils montent tous les deux au filet. Ce match est loin d'être terminé.
There is no tennis player in it. You can see this French elegance reference. You can see Paris, and you can see the Western codes along with our own ones. And then we start from there and build a story. The full book is, I would say, obviously much bigger than this spot, but it was something I wanted to show, to see that we are not only a tennis tournament.
Okay,
that was it.
Very good. Thank you very much. Very, very insightful, and very interesting to see that you've decided to come out of the stadium. And I know that for many organizations, it's quite a big jump to make, to leave the comfort zone of a tournament or a stadium and go into the bigger world and wilder world of maybe other channels of distribution. I know also you have now gone into single branded collections that you're going to sell into other channels.
Yes, we have just reached an agreement with Galeries Lafayette, which is a French department store chain, but which is present all over the world. And we will have, I would say, initiatives around our own brand in China and in France with Roland Garros corners to show that we have had discussions with other department stores all over the world. And I will focus on this, I would say, department store stuff, because yes, we have a lot of opportunities in sports stores, in hypermarkets, but they do not fit with the brand positioning we would like to build with Roland Garros. And we prefer to go step by step with the right retailers, one key retailer per market, and then build from there. Because we are not a movie, we don't have 6 months and then that's over. We have been here for the past 80 years, and we want to be here for the next 80 or 100 years. So it takes time, but right now the fundamentals are here, and we just have to push the various buttons, retail-wise, product-wise, and obviously branding-wise, to make sure we will be successful.
Okay, very good. And I also noticed, and it was interesting because it's been such a tough year for consumption, to see that it's the year when you achieve your best results or your record number of average purchase per customer, which is
yes. which let's say, which doesn't compensate the loss of spectators we got. So we have a lot of stocks for 21 for sure, but let's say this kind of number shows us something more about fan engagement. They wanted to get a share of this exceptional edition. They wanted to get a souvenir, and that's part of the equation. That's not only a licensed product, that's a part of experience, that's a part of what you live during the event. And if you consider that beyond the pure, I would say, extra revenue, which for the time being is obviously much smaller than ticketing, than TV rights by far. But at the end of the day, that's because of merchandising, which builds the fan engagement, which builds the brand. Then the TV rights will grow, that the sponsorship revenues will grow. And that's why it's definitely a strong, a key component of the pie, and not only the cherry on the pie, to my mind.
Okay, well, thank you. That's a good transition, because we talked about retail and we talked about fan experience. So it's a good transition to hand over to Zohar about, because that's your business. You're the retail experts, and you're going to tell us about your expansion plans and your business model. So we're looking forward to that. So Zohar, over to you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Bruno. And a lot of parallels, I think, from what Stephane said, you'll hear across here. So excited to share this with you guys. Just by way of background, I'm Zohar. I run kind of the strategy and general direction for the entire international business for Fanatics, so everything outside of North America, and then captures everything from any new major partner we onboard to become part of our platform and part of our part of our universe of partners, and then anything we do outside in terms of M&A and just type of corporate expansion. And my background before joining Fanatics is one of private equity and investment banking. So Fanatics, we see ourselves as the leading licensed sports platform in the world today, and we operate with what we believe to be some of the greatest kind of sports brands out there. And we focus, as of today, almost purely and exclusively on sports. And so this covers virtually every major league in the US, so everything from the NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, etc., as well as the individual teams. And then on the international front, we work with some of the top assets on this side as well as in Asia. So players like Manchester United, PSG, Bayern, Atletico, etc. And then on the tournament side, we run the event for the Ryder Cup. We run e-com for Formula One, for the DFB and the FA. And our capabilities, I'd say, we're vastly an e-com retailer. So we focus mostly on e-com. However, we have an increasingly growing vertical assortment, including all Nike product for the NFL and Major League Baseball is actually manufactured and distributed by Fanatics today. And holistically as a business, as of this year, we're reaching a point where over 50% of what we're selling is actually vertical product. And so we operate a model that we call a v-commerce model, which is e-com for our partners as well as a vertical product piece associated with that. And so you'll see a note, I think our vision is, while we're not the brand, right? Well, while Stephane was talking about, what is Roland Garros and how, what does it stand for? We see our role in the universe as, how do we give every brand the most shots on goal? How do we open the doors to the global environment? And how do we make sure we maximize, we maximize the opportunity? And so for us, and great transition into the slide, how do we do that? Well, the merchandising business has not been a hockey stick business today. It's been one that's been struggling to show consistent, double-digit growth over the years. And Fanatics holistically over the last 20 years has been able to maintain close to a 40% annual growth rate. And the way we're doing that is by really driving innovation and increasing the product ability we've had. And we're huge believers that more is more in licensing. You got to have the assortment, you got to have the distribution, you have to allow customers to have access to this product. And while technology is going to enable that and is a huge piece of opening the door to the sales channels, you got to just have the actual product available by Nike, by Adidas, by Puma, by any of these big brands, or even the unbranded kind of licensee universe. Has just got to make product available globally. And so that's our goal. And I think the names on the right here may not mean a lot to a lot of people, but the main point of this slide is to say, look, we see ourselves as a tech company. The names you see on here between Insight, Andreessen, Temasek, Silver Lake, Thrive, SoftBank, of course, these are the biggest tech investors in the world today, the premier quote unquote smart money. And they've put a lot of money and faith into our company. Today we're valued at 6 billion plus. And, the expectation is growth. And so the message here is, technology for us is the core. And we're a large company relative, 7,000 employees, 40 offices across the world. I think as of today, we're actually 12 countries. And, just an example, while we're servicing 190 countries, we really are a global business. When the LA Lakers won the championship recently, just in the 3 days post them winning, we shipped out to 110 different countries championship products. And so there really is a global appeal if you open the door to these big assets. And while I'd say, 75+% of our business is e-com, we're a large company, so we'll hit over 3 billion in sales this year. And so we still have a material business in other categories. So I talked about the vertical manufacturing piece, which is manufacturing product either exclusively for the rights holder with which we work, or more broadly wholesale product to be distributed kind of across the retail footprint. And then we also operate multiple venues and stadiums as well as high street stores. And so we do operate physical retail directly. And then the last piece is, we take on management of the master license for different assets, and we manage and relationships with over 1,200 licensees across the globe today. And we're huge believers that the portfolio effect is a driver here, and size does matter in the licensing business because A, we're a big buyer, B, we we open the door to increasing sales, which then encourages licensees to develop bespoke product or increase product assortment. And so, having size in this industry really does help drive and lift the tide, which raises all boats. And so that's kind of our playbook. And, again, just kind of the last piece that I did, we see ourselves primarily as a kind of tech and product, so a v-commerce model company. And we've invested a lot of money into our own technology platform, which is focused 100% on licensed sports. And so this is a cloud platform. We operate it globally. So the second we take on a store, if we were privileged enough to one day manage the Roland Garros again and put it on our platform, then the second we raise a site in Europe, that same site pops up in Korea and the US, and it really is a cloud platform. And we have an annual budget to maintain our leadership position in this technology of 100 million per year, going purely towards this tech development. Again, 600 investment to date already. And I think the key thing here is, again, if you think of the size and the benefit, we manage, I think the site said 250. If you take kind of some of the smaller assets we manage as well, it's over 300 different partners across the globe. And having the cloud platform really enables us to maximize and learn from each of the partners. So I'll give you an example. We operate the store for the SoftBank Hawks, which is the team that just won the national championship in Japan for their baseball league. And so that gets a lot of traffic in Japan, whereas, a different asset like NASCAR may not. And so we learn what works in Japan by having an asset that gets a lot of volume in Japan. And so if we learn that in Japan, a green buy button converts better than a red buy button, well, guess what? The PSG store in Japan is going to get that benefit. The Manchester United store we run in Japan is going to get the benefit of that. The NBA store. So everybody, we run a bunch of tests of what works in different geographies. And again, having this large portfolio helps us ensure everybody benefits from what we learn. And it's kind of this halo effect that just, again, grows everybody. So that's kind of our business. And I think I'd say, the pandemic has really created an interesting environment for us in that, e-com businesses, I think holistically across the world, have seen a step function as people just have had no choice but to shift to this channel. And for us, being primarily an e-commerce business, it's been no different. And we've had a few aha moments, right? We've grown our portfolio as a whole, kind of 30 to 40% of e-com, with some partners that were very heavily dependent on physical retail, and so got huge channel shift into e-com, growing 100+%, right? And then you've gotten these new categories, like we've done over $50 million of sales worth of masks today, which is a category that was non-existent before. And so it's this, having the ability to be innovative, bring product to the market, do it quickly, do it on a global scale, and do it in a way that's relevant to the local consumer with local fulfillment is really kind of the key to us on how you explode the market. And I'm sure we'll hit some of these things in our conversation post the presentation. So I'll stop there.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's been quite insightful and quite impressive actually to see those numbers. And I particularly like the more is more in merchandising. I totally agree with that. I mean, just in order to put that in perspective, how many SKUs do you have on your? So we have over a million SKUs, over a million SKUs today that we manage. And I think if you look at shops that we run where we're the official partner for the club and where we have product rights, you're going to see assortments in the hundreds of products from the technical, but then we match it with hundreds of products of unbranded. And I think, we didn't quite hit, but you saw in the logos, we had people like Walmart or Coupang. So we partner with who we believe to be the best retailers in every geography. And the way we partner is we
we run the licensed category on their online shop. So today you go to Walmart, you type in Tom Brady or any NFL asset or any licensed sports asset, you're going to get the Fanatics assortment, and we're actually the back end fulfilling that. And my point in saying that on more is more, you know, if you were selling shoes, right, and somebody wanted to buy like take a Zalando, for example, somebody wanted to buy white running shoes, well, they're going to buy white running shoes. But if you're a Manchester United fan and you want a Manchester United shirt, well, guess what? You're never buying a PSG shirt. You're never buying a Manchester City shirt. You're never buying an Arsenal shirt. And so you have to have the exact same assortment available for every club in order to enable to maximize, you know, the appeal to the fan, because they don't care about anybody else except for that one club that they live and breathe every day.
Mm-hmm. And in your experience, do you see that some of the clubs have the same level of maturity when it comes to developing product ranges in terms of depth and breadth, or are there some, you know, good pupils in the class and some others who still need to develop their business?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not an even playing field today. It's definitely, and listen, some of that is because of the club's focus, and some of that is also because of the technical partners and the restrictions they put on these clubs. And so you've got a Nike who may restrict somebody more or less than Adidas does for a particular club. And so you've got these dynamics of, it's not an easy universe to manage for these clubs. And, you know, the merchandise organizations, and I think we'll hit this later, but the merch orgs have not been the most powerful, you know, guys within the club organizations. And so when you look at a sponsorship check, well, you're not going to push back to, you know, anger the sponsor in order to maybe keep some of the product rights you'd like to be able to license out. And so I think you've got, as the clubs are more powerful within, you know, their sponsorship universe, and just overall, you know, as a brand, they're more keen to focus on how do I maximize this merchandising piece, and are more able to achieve what they need to in order to maximize that than some of the smaller clubs. But that said, you've got a club like St. Pauli in Germany who's done an unbelievable job around kind of brand building and merchandising, even though on pitch you'd argue, you know, they're not Bayern, right? So, you know, it's definitely not an even playing field, but I think it's an increased focus for all of our partners, especially in this environment.
It's actually, using St. Pauli as an example is a very good transition, because I'm a great, not only because I lived in Hamburg for a few years, but the storytelling that St. Pauli has been able to build out of nothing. I mean, the club has never won any major title. They play in the second division, and they generate almost 20% of their revenues from merchandising with a great story. And it's a good introduction, because I can then hand over to Jay, who's, as the creative person, can tell us about that, you know, the art of storytelling. And I know that you've had the opportunity to work on many of the strongest entertainment franchises. So looking forward to hearing from you what you've got to say.
Yeah, no, I love the story. In fact, it'll be difficult for me to squeeze it into 10 minutes. People who know me know that I can talk for days. I'm going to start here, and I'm going to work through it fairly quickly, because it'd be great to have a chat afterwards. I'm just starting. First of all, I just want to highlight that I'm VP of Creative for EMEA. So it's nice that you gave me a promotion. It made it look like I was running the world, but I am responsible for the European market. It's important to let everyone know that. This first slide just shows the breadth of Warner Media, and Warner Media is an ever-changing landscape, and there's lots of people in there. But what we work on in consumer products is these brands that are just across the top, the DC universe, the Wizarding World, which is part of Harry Potter, Looney Tunes, and so forth. So we've got a lot of stories to tell, and storytelling is the part that I'm going to focus on today, because I think that it makes a big difference in everything relating to the fan. So, you know, when it comes to storytelling, in the sale of merchandise, people don't only want, you know, the great product these days, they really want the story behind it, just like we were just talking about with the Hamburg Club. And it's also what you're talking about with Roland Garros and your collaborations. There's a lot more collabs going on now because it's the story that the two parties bring together that makes a difference. So before we tell you that story, I want to kind of tell you, you know, how and who you're telling that story to, and that's the part that I think people miss a lot of times. You know, you kind of focus on your story, but really you got to know who you're selling the story to. And you know, do you want to break down stereotypes? Are you trying to connect with all ages and genders? Are you focusing on super fans, casual fans, new fans? Very different story, particularly for those last three. So that's why I want to focus on this one event that we did, and it's a very big the DC Fandom that took place in the summer. Now, this kind of came out of COVID, and the most important thing is, you know, it says it in the name. That's why I was talking about the story. We're really focusing on the fans. If I talk about my history in licensing, when I started, we were really focusing on telling our story to potential licensees. Then it's shift from licensees to retailers. And now it's really all about the fan. And this isn't just about merchandise, this is everything. If you follow, you know, the press at the moment, that's what our company stands for. It's telling stories, and it's telling stories to the fans. And the fans are the ones who are driving everything we do. So with COVID, we came up against a difficult time when it made it difficult to tell stories to fans. So that's when we came up with this new way to engage them. It took all parts of the company, and Bruno knows, working in the past with Warner Brothers, bringing all corners of the business together is not an easy thing to do. And that's one thing COVID's done as well, is it's accelerated this ability for people to collaborate. And if I had a dollar for every time somebody said the word pivot in corporate life right now, I'd probably be very wealthy, because that's the corporate word of the moment. You know, you have to be able to shift and be reactive. So we needed to know, you know, who we were trying to get to, you know, what we wanted to do, and turn it into a story for fans. And that's what this fandom was. It was a 24-hour event, celebrated the DC universe. It's a virtual experience that allowed fans on 7 continents to interact with DC. And I think the best way to explain it really is not by me talking about it, but by showing this short sizzle that's on the next slide.
Welcome to the Hall of Heroes.
On August 22nd comes an unprecedented global fan event.
Hello, everybody. It's all DC, all the time. DC Fandom is unlike anything you've ever seen before. I'm actually standing inside a stage that Jim Lee himself drew. How incredibly cool is that?
It's crazy, right?
This worldwide mega event is for DC fans across the globe.
Ça va, DC Fandom?
Hola, mi gente.
Guten Tag, meine Freunde.
We've got exclusive footage, insider info, the latest DC news, and huge announcements.
You know what I'm talking about.
There was no way that I could come here and not bring a look at the movie.
Yes. There's so much cool content to look at.
That was a really special episode.
Designed just for you, the absolute DC fan.
It's amazing!
Whoop, whoop.
There's something that I can show you.
Exclusive content!
Stuff that seems impossible ends up becoming possible.
I am beyond excited to be sharing this moment with you guys.
Awesome.
Hang on tight, because we are about to whisk you around the DC Fandom. Are you guys ready? Let's get this thing started.
DC Fandom, Hall of Heroes. All fans welcome, 24 hours only, August 22nd. And there's only one place you can experience it, at DC Fandom.
Warner Brothers knows that, it takes us that long to approve a product sometimes. So I think that it's a pretty impressive thing. This slide just shows the different ways that fans could work into the world. So you had the Uverse, the area that fans could express themselves. They could, that's where fan art was created. They had cosplay and character makeup tutorials, things like that. You had the Watchverse, it's an area to watch classic and exclusive content. Exclusive content is the thing that really drives all the social buzz. Kidsverse, so I talked about, different ways to approach different fans. That's our entry point into the franchise. So kid-friendly video games and different activities for them. And so the goal is to really touch all the fans. And in the DC world, we have 0 to 99 is what we say about fans. In the Insiderverse, this was the part that's kind of like Comic-Con, if anybody knows the comic book world, where it had a look into the DC world, including talent panels and interviews. So the story, you think of the story as the movie. The story for fans now is who made the movie, why did they make it, what are the backgrounds of the people who made it, what was their motivation. That's becoming much, much more and more important. It works just the same way in sport. That is, I live in the UK, but I'm from the United States, and Red Zone is a big part of our Sunday night. Now with me and my son, and I got disconnected with the NFL until we started watching these all or nothing videos from ESPN, and it's when the players, their background, that's what helps tell the story, and it's the same with the DC story. As well as those, if you go to the next slide, after the other stories that we tell through merchandise, and this is a link to our other panelists, because this was a Wonder Woman collaboration that was done with Venus Williams 11 brand. So we're reaching out to different fans in different sports, as well as different parts of the DC universe. The next slide just highlights limited edition merchandise, programs that is the kind of the final piece of the puzzle, and this is where Fanatics structure comes in, because this was offered exclusively with online retail outlets. I don't think we did it with you guys, I think, in the end, but it definitely is the right fit. Judging from your scale, it's probably the timing that made it difficult. But that's where companies like Warner Brothers and Fanatics and the sports world really link together. In fact, I think we are linking together on the Space Jam project. So this exclusive limited edition offers personalization is more and more becoming, the biggest part of the story. That is all about the fan making the choices for themselves, not us making the choices for them. Just like what Zohar said about, you're not going to want to buy Man City merch if you're a Man United fan, and you're offering them the choice, and that's what we're doing. We're offering our fans the choices of what to do. So this event, it was watched in over 227 countries. You had 22 million times it was viewed. The content was viewed. It had a very positive feedback, 90% positive feedback on social. All helps to strengthen the relationship with our online retailers, and most importantly, the fans. The fans is all we talk about now, and everything is about how do you tell the stories to the fan, what they like. And then finally, just kind of wrap up on the last slide to highlight the key takeaways. The strong storytelling is really the thing that engages fans. Different stories for different fans. Job security for me, we've got lots of brands and lots of fans, so we're constantly thinking of new ways to tell those stories. And when you get it right, it really creates this strong purchase intent. We're not talking about Harry Potter today. I'm using a DC example, but the Harry Potter, you think of it as a movie license. That the first movie is 20 years old, and our merchandise business is the largest it's ever been. And it's mainly because we tell a really strong story, and we know our fans really, really well, and we make sure that we're true to their beliefs. So all the above. Like we say, right product and to the right consumer. That's really the key. And I think that's it for me.
Okay, thanks, Jay. Very, very useful and very impressive to see how this DC stories coming together, and also even more interesting to see that it's Wonder Woman, which has been one of the surprise characters and successful characters of the DC universe, which was not something that people anticipated, that she would reach such a level of popularity, which is a great sign that also in the perception of superheroes things are changing, and that the girl power is getting a fair share of attention.
Yeah, that character reached another fan base, didn't it? That's what makes it unique. You know, it's a much broader fan base. It's not just, you know, the fanboys in the basement playing video games and collecting figures. You know, it's a different consumer.
Yeah, and I'd just like to use one of your sentences to say that different stories for different fans, and maybe use that as a talking point for all of you and all of us here. And maybe Stephane, you can answer that, because you're in that stage where the brand is moving, as you said, from being a tennis tournament and now becoming, for an elite, the few 100,000 people who could get a ticket to go to see the game and buy products. And now you've got potentially other types of fans, the people who watch the tournament on television, or people who simply play and like tennis. So how do you make the transition in terms of fan from those hardcore fans who go to the tournament to the other ones you want to sell your products to?
Storytelling. No, but talking about that, I think, as discussed, it requires time and education. But I think you're right. We used to consider our fans as, I would say, hardcore fans. I would say even French tennis licenses, and I would say the target was our 1 or 2 million players in France, and we thought we could go beyond. And I think I fully agree with Jay. Different fans, different products, different stories. And now we talk about casual fans coming from China, coming from Brazil, the US, and so on. And even when we talk about casual fans, the US ones who know the tournament at the French Open are not the Brazilian ones who know the tournament as Roland Garros, but who know the tournament under the Gustavo Kuerten angle, and that's on it. So we have to, I would say, to think global, but act local. The local approach we saw in a few, I would say, licensing tutorials and guides, but we do that actually. That's to say, we work with our Chinese partners to develop products based on our own style guide, based on our own brand DNA, but which fit with, I would say, some local storytelling or local storytelling adaptation with local products as well, with a different fitting, with different product categories. And same thing in the US. They are not interested in the same kind of stories, in the same kind of products. And then we try to adapt ourselves, and once again to develop things which are not only tennis rackets with a Roland Garros logo and tennis polo shirts, even though Lacoste is famous all over the world. We have to be more clever. We have to adapt ourselves to our fans, meaning to our various markets. And it's definitely through the storytelling Jay referred to. But in my mind, that's not only a 10-minute process and 10 or 12 slides. It needs some time. We have to understand the expectations of everyone before being successful.
And maybe sometimes it's challenging with club organization or club sports, but sometimes even more challenging with federations to have internal, convince people internally. Sometimes it's more difficult than convince the fans and other people. So how did you manage that?
I don't know what you're talking about. No, but just kidding. No, and let's say coming from the NBA world and from the video game world before, I would say yes, there is a difference. When I was talking about the hardcore tennis players who are I would say, perhaps the only targets that our, I would say, board considers, then we have to, I would say, to have a kind of an internal storytelling, convincing people about what we've just talked about, meaning, you know what, if we develop this kind of approach, it will mean extra revenues, which will definitely contribute to a newer stadium, a new, let's say, more means to the clubs, more means to the tennis players. So they open the doors, and then they understand that this licensing approach helps, I would say, the brand, and by capillarity, the federation, about, I would say the success of tennis and clay tennis in China, in the US, and so on. And then the reputation of the French Tennis Federation is bigger all over the world, and even in France compared to other sports federations, because we are seen as an example. And then our, I would say, board opens doors and tells us that's the right approach. And I must admit that after a few difficult months, they are definitely into it, and they push the buttons as much as they can right now. And I don't have the constraints I used to have. And that's now pretty similar to the field I got when I had my NBA cap.
Okay, good. Well, it's a good sign that things are changing, and it's
sure.
Good. I mean, coming from the entertainment industry, all these things seem natural, whereas in the sport industry, you know, beyond the logo, sometimes it's difficult to think that you can create, and you have to create a big style guide with different assets and different stories for different groups. Maybe over to you, Zohar, because a question I have is, we talked about that earlier on, but the different clubs seems to have different levels of development, different strategies maybe. And if you think about the clubs that you work with, do you find, and maybe you have some examples of clubs which are pretty well advanced in terms of their storytelling and the way they address different types of fans, whether different types because they're in different countries or because they are, you know, casual fans as opposed to hardcore fans? Would you have kind of not a ranking, but some examples of clubs you find are particularly advanced?
Yeah, definitely. I think, look, for us, one of the most exciting new partnerships was a recent one we did, which was with PSG. And I think if you look at PSG today, this is a club that made a decision to become a brand off the pitch, or, you know, for you, Jay, this is my new saying, off the pitch, with the European term, but on the field. And, you know, these guys have put so much effort into being associated with just, frankly, being cool, right? You know, Nike helped drive that with the Jordan brand and being the only club that is affiliated with Jordan in football today, or in European football today. And so that helped create a boost. But on top of that, I mean, they're doing collaborations with high-end fashion, with music. They're really making it about Paris, right? It's almost like the Jay-Z song of making the Yankees hat more famous than a Yankee can, right? It's no longer about just the sport. It's about, you know, we are Paris, and we are cool, and we are a brand. And I think that's really one that exemplifies how you can take a sport and turn it into a brand. And you know, it's kind of like you had Michael Jordan, now you have the Jordan brand, and you had PSG on the pitch, and now you have PSG, the brand. And I think that's cool. Then I think it's easy to compare that to much smaller clubs that don't have the appeal. So I'll give you an example of much bigger clubs that, you know, when you've been a, you know, not to pick on any one club, but let's just use a name. If you've been Real Madrid, right, over the years, it's been, you had Ronaldo and you had a legacy and you have the brand. It's pretty easy to rely on what you've done on pitch to kind of drive your brand. But the reality is, you know, you lose a mega player and now you've lost some of the appeal of what, you know, that you had with people that weren't necessarily hardcore Real Madrid fans, but frankly, they loved seeing Ronaldo's shirtless pictures on Instagram or whatever it was that kind of drove engagement with anybody who was outside the pitch. And now, you know, you have to do something. You have to do something cool. You have to become outside of that. And I think some of these, you know, we're seeing that affiliation with clubs, especially as social media expands, especially as you look outside of the core geography, is becoming more and more with the player than it is necessarily with the actual fan once you get outside of the core fan base. And so I think these clubs are seeing the transition and the need. I think, you know, you look at somebody like AC Milan today announcing a partnership with Rock Nation and with Paper Airplanes, Jay-Z's brand, and like everybody's realizing, you know, you gotta be something else to reach that extended fan base. I mean, I think Jay alluded to that as well. Like everybody's trying to do it in their own way, whether it's a different you know, a different kind of hero that appeals to a different public set. It's the same thing. You got to have something that appeals to a different fan base. And these guys, you know, it might be a fan of the player, it might be a fan of the team, it might be a flair of cool. And you need to have an appeal for all of those categories.
Yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned about Real Madrid, because, you know, it's, if you look at the revenues generated from merchandising, it's one of the lowest as a percentage of the total revenues. They make about 25 million according to their numbers coming from merchandising, which is a quarter of what Man United is making. And yet they have the largest community on Facebook. So it's a big club, but in terms of converting their fans into actual purchases of product, it seems they still have a long way to go. And you talked about Ronaldo. When Ronaldo moved to Juventus, you then saw a big jump in the revenues of merchandising revenues of Juventus. So it seemed that Juventus has been able to use Ronaldo possibly more efficiently from a commercial standpoint.
Well, I think you have you know, I'll give you a different example of if you know, Jay spoke about the NFL. You look at Tom Brady and the Patriots in the US, right? You had a dynasty that was the best-selling team kind of globally and in the US for a long time, just because they were winners, right? And all of a sudden you have Tom Brady, the star quarterback, moving to the Buccaneers, and I mean, the Bucs become the highest selling, you know, team all of a sudden. And so you definitely, listen, you have these once in a generation players, right? Where, you know, a Ronaldo, a Messi, a Tom Brady, a LeBron James, you know, these guys that wherever they go, they're going to drive sales, right? They're the human version of a superhero to the sports fan, and so they're going to get the following, and people are going to buy and follow. So I think, look, I think Juventus benefited from Ronaldo's status as much as probably other teams would have benefited from Ronaldo's status, right? But they were a big enough brand to where you could turn it globally. I think if Ronaldo went to a non-global brand couldn't afford him, but for the sake of an example, you needed the combination of a superstar and a global brand to explode it, and they did it, you know, effectively. So I think a lot of that was Ronaldo, I'll put it that way, and what he's done to promote himself on a global basis, and that.
Okay, there's just to wrap up on the storytelling bit, and then we'll move to another one. Is one thing that strikes me when I look at style guides that created in the sport business and style guides in the entertainment industries, it seemed to be much more assets and materials coming from the entertainment business. So, Jay, I know you've worked on a number of style guides for different properties. So, on average, just to give an order of, how many different assets or pages, or how big is a style guide for a Harry Potter, or just to give an order of magnitude in terms of what's been created and what material is made available to licensees and then to consumers.
It's interesting, Bruno, because it's really changes. It's changing a lot at the moment. So it's a question of, is more better, or is flexibility better?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants a unique point of difference. You have lots of people, and you have a very successful brand like Harry Potter, and you want to maintain your brand, and you want to maintain the way it looks. So if you want, it's almost impossible to create a style guide big enough to create point of difference for everybody. So you're more focused on trying to create flexibility and a kind of modular quality, so people can pick and choose and adapt without losing what the brand stands for. So the number of assets we provide isn't as important as the flexibility of the assets we provide.
Okay.
And then we do tell stories on a from an aesthetic point of view. What are the trends? What are the graphic trends at a given moment, a given season, that relate to that particular brand? So the trends that we would pick for a DC property like Batman would be very different than we would for Harry Potter, where a brand like Classic Animation would have very broad, you could slap Classic Animation on any graphic trend because it's basically pop culture. And I think sports has the ability to do the same thing. And I would assume, well, working with the sports organizations as well, we all, the designers' favorite villain are the lawyers, basically, because they're the ones that don't want you messing with anything, and we're desperate to give some flexibility, and that point of difference plays to those different fans again. So I didn't really answer your question. I think it's not size as much as it is flexibility and style.
No, you did in a way, because the flexibility and the modularity is part of the answer, because I'm assuming that when you deal with a big customer or a retailer like a Primark, you're going to be able to provide them with specific assets that will be usable by them only, just because you've got such a rich range of options.
Yeah, that was another story. I mean, we provide about 2,500 concepts to a partner like Primark every quarter. So it's not exactly one graphic, but if we do a movie style guide, which is an event more like a championship sports event, those guys are really big and robust, but they're also very regimented and restrictive because it's about a particular moment in time. If it's about an evergreen brand, we do much smaller guides more often, so that you have a lot of variety and you can make sure that you're on trend, because you can't spend a lot of time nowadays. 6 weeks in the trend business is a very long time. You can go from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s in trends within 1 year. So you have to kind of be quick to market. It's more quick and small nowadays, really.
Which is a nice link to what Zohar was saying about PSG and their approach to the market, which is much more in that vein than in the traditional sports brand vein. Maybe just jumping to another topic, and I'm going to group two topics together. The question is, and that's why you guys are here today, because you're among the guys who are setting the way for future development of merchandising. So, having started that process, Stephane, with Roland Garros, where do you see the brand going tomorrow? And if you had to say this is where we'd like to be in 5 years, what would that be?
Actually, and as discussed, I experienced the way with the NBA and then with Ubisoft on some of their brands, and we worked with Warner and a few others, and I think Jay's reference to entertainment brands and the way they inspire sports brands is definitely the right one. And as far as we're concerned, we talked about storytelling and everything. I think we should not forget the sport as the key component. We were talking about the superstars. Zohar was talking about the superstars, which are the core of our activity, and I don't forget that. So we have to develop our tennis competition first and foremost, and then we can play with the other, I would say, pieces of the big cake. And when we talk about these pieces and the merchandising one, and the step-by-step approach I was referring to, I would tell you that we will be better in the key selected countries I mentioned in my slide first, and then we will perhaps open new countries. But I want to be perhaps better instead of bigger first. And in 5 years, if I'm good in the 4 countries I mentioned, rather than bigger in 220 countries in which the tournament is broadcast, to my mind, that will be a success. I don't want to be listed in the 220 territories without the storytelling, without, I would say, the fan engagement we've just talked about. I want to be good in the 4 countries with the 360 approach, based on our tennis competition, with merchandising revenues, with local sponsors, with, let's say, perhaps hospitality packages sold to the fans. And I want to build I would say, the brand pie in each of these countries instead of sending cherries all over the world. So to answer your question, in 5 years, if I can build the pie in these 4 countries, that's my ultimate goal.
Okay, good. And then Zohar, sort of same question to you. You shared with us the various pillars of your business. So you're an e-commerce mainly players currently, virtually integrated partly, but also looking at new areas. Where do you see the growth coming from? Where would you like to be in 5 years?
Yeah, so I think maybe ties perfectly to what Jay was saying. Like, we believe the industry today doesn't tie with the reality of sport, right? A retailer today needs to know a year in advance what team is going to sell and what player is going to sell, because that's the time frame Nike, Adidas, and these guys are working on. And so the supply chain needs to be disrupted. And in the US, we had enough volume to do that, where, I'll give you an example. We do anywhere between kind of $20 to $60 million when a team wins a championship within a matter of a few days. Sometimes you do 10 plus million in a matter of hours. And so you have to have a supply chain that's able to create product, distribute it, and do it effectively. And that just doesn't exist today. So to me, goal number, and especially in Europe and Asia for sure. And so to me, number one is, we would like to expand our agile supply chain that we've gotten to be very effective in the US globally. Number two is, we have to truly open distribution and make product available globally. And so you look at today, we spoke about Manchester United. I don't know the exact number, but I would tell you, if you were a Chinese sports retailer today and you wanted to have a Manchester United section in your store, you probably have less than 10 SKUs to choose from Adidas. That doesn't make sense, right? You've got a real fan base, you've got a focus on a sport, and you have no distribution to support it. And so we would like to unlock distribution globally for sport holistically. And then I think the last piece is, we're looking to be relevant. And what I mean by relevant is, you know, you spoke a little bit about what is a product range, you know, and a product range is a t-shirt that today, you know, may have a logo, but I want a t-shirt that somebody wants to wear. I want it to be relevant for females. I want it to be relevant for kids. I want to have product range that are relevant for the right demographic and the right geography at the right price point. And so that's kind of from the product side. And then on the tech side, listen, we today 80+% of sales for our product are happening on mobile. And so the reality is, you know, we're not in a business where people go in weekly and buy a jersey, right? The average fan will buy a jersey 1, 2, maybe you get somebody to buy something 3 times. And so it's all about being relevant at the moment they feel the emotion and the drive. And so somebody wins, well, guess what? Now you want to buy a shirt. Somebody, you know, a player breaks a record, scores 3 goals. Well, now I want to buy a shirt. And so we have to be real time, and real time means, you know, the second something happened on social media, you're there. Product assortment changes to tie to what is trending on social media. So the relevant product is first when somebody goes on your shop. You're getting the right consumer, gets the right advertisement at the right time, and everything is synced together with the club's marketing, with our technology. And so we're doing all these things, but like, we're not doing it at the scale it should be. And listen, we'd like to think of ourselves as industry disruptors, and we haven't disrupted enough. That's kind of the punchline for me. And so that's, you know, I think those are the categories for us.
All right, thank you. Well, it's time to conclude. So what I would like to do is ask each of you, imagine I'm a small or a large sport organization with little or merchandising. I need each of you to give me a sort of a one tip. So Jay, what would be your tip to grow my merchandising business?
Listen to your fans.
Okay.
What Zohar just said is you know, the next couple of years, it's all going to be about the consumer and the person who's buying it. I'm exhausted just hearing his conversation, but that's the reality of where we're going to be. You need to be able to change every week, every day to what's happening, and that information is going to come from the fans, not from us.
Okay, all right. Stephane?
Call Jay. No. No. But let's say I'm kidding, but not so much. Actually, I think that was definitely a great decision you made inviting Jay to this sports licensing, sport licensing summit, because to my mind, the entertainment companies are the ones to follow, are the ones to inspire yourself from, instead of Manchester United or the other neighbor. To my mind, Disney, Warner, and a few others are still a step beyond, and you can definitely pick the right approach and adapt it to your sport, to your federation, to your organization, with, let's say, sport as a key component of it. But to my mind, the recipes they've built their success on are definitely inspiring. So, and usually it's not so usual for any sport licensing managers.
Okay. And Zohar, you have the last word.
Yeah, well, Stephane kind of killed it for me, because I was going to say focus on pitch and call Fanatics, but I guess call us NJ. That would be my listen. The reality is you can't do it all. You have to know your core business and look at what needs to be achieved on a global basis, and find the right partner and or investment structure internally to do that. I think that's, that's my message.
And I do agree with Zohar. Call Fanatics as well.
Yes, there you go.
No, you can't do it.
You two can talk offline in a minute, right?
Yeah, I'll send you a check later, Stephane.
Okay, well, guys, thank you very much. I really appreciated your your time, more importantly, your insights and your openness to share some data, some numbers, and your experience and expertise and vision. So I'm sure that people will be very excited by listening to what you have to say. It's been a pleasure to be with you. And I wish you all a very good Christmas and hopefully a happier 2021 than it was in 2020, although some of you achieved record results, but still, we all hope that 2021 will be a better year.